did the government basically use big tech to silence people? For years that idea was waved away, called a conspiracy theory. But now we've got a huge tech company admitting, yeah, it happened. And they're actually reversing course. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into it, wading into the evidence, the sources that seem to show this coordinated push between Washington and Silicon Valley to control what gets said online. Specifically, we're looking at Google, YouTube, deciding to bring back accounts they banned mostly over COVID-19 stuff and election topics.
Yeah, our goal here isn't just the headlines. We want to unpack how this control mechanism actually worked. We're looking at a big congressional report, internal messages, and figuring out what Google's reversal really tells us about, government reach. You'll see how the pressure was applied, why maybe these companies went along with it, and what it means for, your ability to actually debate things freely in America.
Okay, so let's start with the news that kicked this off. Google, right, through YouTube, says it's reinstating creators banned for political speech. And this isn't some minor policy change. It feels like a pretty major correction after years of, let's say, very strict content rules.
It really is the closest we've gotten to an outright admission of political censorship, isn't it? Google didn't just quietly flip a switch. They actually said that the Biden administration pressed platform to remove COVID-19 content. But what's interesting is their defense. They're claiming they initially fought against those efforts on First Amendment grounds. But, if they fought it, why did the ban stick around for 2 years, right through the peak of the whole public health debate?
That's the contradiction, yeah. If they thought it violated the First Amendment, but they complied anyway, well, it suggests the pressure must have been pretty intense. And these bans, they hit dissenting voices hard. Now you've got figures like Representative Jim Jordan, whose committee did a lot of digging here, calling this change a win for free expression.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just a YouTube thing either. We should remember Mark Zuckerberg at Meta. He confirmed back in August 2024 in a letter that the Biden administration had repeatedly pressured Meta in 2021 to remove content related to COVID-19.
Right.
So when you put it together, the evidence points towards, a coordinated strategy across multiple platforms, seemingly coming from the White House itself, trying to create a uniform message on really sensitive political issues.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit more. If the White House isn't issuing, direct orders, because that would be a clear First Amendment problem, how exactly did they exert this pressure? What was this pressure campaign that these giant tech companies seemingly couldn't ignore? We probably need to look at that House Judiciary Committee report, the one from the subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government.
Right, that report, titled The Censorship Industrial Complex. It lays out allegations of this month-long campaign to pressure Facebook, Google, Amazon, basically the big players, into censoring stuff. And importantly, they looked at, tens of thousands of emails, internal documents. So it's not just based on speculation.
And what did they actually find in those documents? What's the really shocking part?
Well, a few key things. First, the evidence apparently shows big tech did change its rules because of White House pressure. That's huge.
Okay.
But maybe even more startling is what they were asked to target. The public line was always about stopping dangerous misinformation, right? Health stuff. But the investigation found they were also pushed to censor true information, satire, and other content that did not violate the platform's policies.
True information and satire, so not just false claims, but things that were accurate or just, making fun of the situation.
Exactly. That finding really suggests the goal wasn't just public safety. It was about controlling the narrative, suppressing criticism, even jokes.
And how did they get these companies to do it? The report mentions leverage. What kind of leverage does the White House have over a company like Google?
That's where the government's power really comes in, even without passing a law. For these massive tech companies, Meta, Google, their biggest worries aren't really competitors. They're regulators in Washington.
Okay, so regulatory threats.
Yeah, think about things like antitrust action, the threat of breaking up the company, or changes to Section 230, the law that protects platforms from liability for user content. That's fundamental to their business model.
Right. They spend millions lobbying against those things.
Precisely. So when the White House, which oversees all the regulators, calls up and essentially says, we need you to handle this content problem, the implied threat is enormous. It's not just about one piece of content. It's potentially about their entire future business structure. That's the leverage. It's a powerful, if unspoken, threat.
And the report actually found specific examples of this kind of language, didn't it? There was a quote sent to YouTube.
Yes, this one really captures the tone. An administration official wrote to YouTube, saying, we want to be sure that you have a handle on vaccine hesitancy generally and are working toward making the problem better. Woo! And then this kicker. This is a concern that is shared at the highest, and I mean highest levels of the White House.
Wow. Highest levels. That doesn't sound like a friendly suggestion.
Not at all. It's textbook coercion, really. When a government official invokes the president, the highest levels, to tell a private company to fix a political problem, well, that's using the weight of the state to get around the First Amendment's limits on government censorship. The message is clear. The president is watching. Comply, or else. The or else doesn't even need to be spelled out.
And this is where we see the real-world impact, isn't it? Because the stuff getting suppressed wasn't always crazy talk. Sometimes it was dissenting views that, turned out to be credible later on. It shows how this kind of outsourced censorship can shut down important debate, not just lies.
Absolutely. The lab leak theory for COVID-19 is the prime example, right? For a long time, if you even suggested COVID might have come from a lab, you were branded a conspiracy theorist, spreading misinformation, and boom, banned from platforms. But then later you have government agencies, intelligence communities concluding, yeah, actually that's a plausible theory, a very plausible one. So by banning it early as misinformation, they effectively stopped unnecessary public discussion from happening when it mattered most.
And wasn't there also the issue with YouTube's policy about the World Health Organization?
Oh yeah, that was pretty extreme. Their rule was basically banning anything that would go against World Health Organization recommendations.
But the WHO kept changing its recommendations, sometimes really quickly, like on masks or whether asymptomatic people could spread it.
Exactly. So you have this situation where the official guidance was shifting, sometimes day by day, but questioning the current guidance, even if it changed tomorrow, could get you censored.
That seems fundamentally anti-science, doesn't it? Science relies on questioning things.
It absolutely does. It essentially turned critical thinking, or even just pointing out inconsistencies, into a violation. It creates this environment where, as the report suggests, ideas aren't fairly tested and debated on their merits.
And this tactic, this government pressure using implied threats, you mentioned it, has a name.
Yes, it's often called jawboning. It's when government officials use their position, their influence, maybe the threat of regulation, to pressure private actors into doing something the government can't legally order them to do, like censoring speech.
And the sources suggest this wasn't just aimed at big tech online. There was that incident with Jimmy Kimmel.
Right, that connects back. After Kimmel made some controversial comments following Charlie Kirk's death, he was briefly suspended by Sinclair, which owns some ABC affiliates. The allegation floating around, mentioned in the context of these government pressure discussions, was that the administration might have tried using the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, to lean on broadcasters.
So threatening their broadcast licenses.
That was the accusation, yeah. The idea being you use the FCC's power over licenses to silence critics. So whether it's threatening YouTube with antitrust or maybe threatening a TV station owner with the FCC, the underlying principle is the same, leveraging government power to shape political speech.
Okay, so bringing this all together, what's the big takeaway for someone listening to this? It sounds like the evidence confirms what many suspected, that powerful people in government were effectively using these huge tech platforms, which are regulated by the government, as a kind of proxy to control speech, outsourcing the censorship, basically, to get around the First Amendment.
That's really the core issue, the blurring of lines. It's one thing for a private company to have its own content rules. It's entirely different when the government is heavily pressuring them, especially when they're pushing to remove true information, satire, and other content that doesn't even violate the company's own policies.
Yeah.
When that happens, it does more than just silence one side. It erodes public trust across the board. How can you trust institutions or the information flow when you know this kind of manipulation might be happening behind the scenes? It really damages the transparency you need for a healthy democracy.
So the First Amendment is there to stop the government from censoring us. But if the government holds so much power over these platforms, antitrust, Section 230, all that leverage, how do we even tell the difference anymore between a private company making its own choice about content and, well, basically doing the government's bidding? Is that level of communication, that pressure between Washington and Silicon Valley, even compatible with a truly free society?
That is the fundamental question, isn't it? Especially now, when so much of our public debate happens on these platforms run by just a handful of companies. Are they truly private actors when they're under that kind of constant potential pressure from the state?
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for breaking that down.
Always interesting to dig into the sources.
Indeed. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. We'll leave you with that question to ponder.